Sybil Faunthorpe's Diary. Lowther Street, November 14, 1860 blank. I suppose to keep a diary is about as foolish a thing as anyone can do, waste of time in the present and self-abasement in the future. I dare say I shall hate myself when I read over these pages in years to come and see what a stupid creature I was at 19 years of age. However, I am driven to scribble about myself and my feelings for want of anything better to do in the long, lonely evenings when the children are gone to bed, and Mrs. Hazelton is out, and I have the dreary schoolroom all to myself. I used to read any novel I could find lying about downstairs and bring it up here for an evening, till Mrs. Hazelton found me out and forbade it. Novels, my dear Miss Faunthorpe, she preached, are the worst possible reading for a young woman in your position, enervating the mind, weakening the logical faculty, which in your brain, I regret to say, is sorely deficient. I felt inclined to ask her why she reads novels if they are so injurious. She has a knack of reading one's thoughts, and answered my objection before I could give it expression. For the head of a household, who must always have some portion of care and anxiety, novel reading is an innocent relaxation. But the instructor of youth should employ her leisure in widening her circle of knowledge. The books in the study bookcase are quite at your service, Miss Faunthorpe, whenever you like to avail yourself of them. And then she sailed out of the room to go to a dinner party, dressed in maroon velvet and old Brussels lace, and looking very handsome for an old woman. She must be 45 at the least. Perhaps I ought not to complain of my bondage, for I might be worse off than I am. Mrs. Hazelton is fond of preaching, but she is not unkind to me. She has no grown-up daughters, and whenever she has company, I am asked down to the drawing-room to play and sing, and make myself generally useful, and as she has a good deal of company, this happens tolerably often. Luckily, music is my strong point. When Mrs. Hazelton is in a good humour, she takes me for a drive in the park, and I see the world and hear what is going on. I go to a fashionable church with the children on Sundays and Saints' days, and am altogether much better off than in my Uncle Robert's poverty-stricken household in dull old Redcastle, where I knew no one worth knowing, and where life is only another name for vegetation. I am sure the cabbages in Uncle's wretched kitchen garden had quite as much enjoyment of life as Marion and I, more indeed, for they had sunshine and perpetual idleness and bees and butterflies buzzing and skimming about them, while we had old house linen to patch and darn, and the tradesmen's books to puzzle over, and Jenny to teach and mend for, and scold, and puddings to make, and buttons to sew on from January to December. I think there never was such a man as Uncle Robert for wrenching the buttons off his shirts and pushing his toes through his socks. So at the worst, though I have to grind French, Italian and German verbs in a mill all the week through, and listen to those wretched children strumming Kalkbrenner's exercises 3 hours a day, I am better off than Marion. I have £40 a year to spend upon clothes, and I see a great many nice people. Mrs. Hazelton boasts that she only knows the best people. I am no tuft hunter, my dear, she tells me when she is in one of her expansive moods. You will see very few titles in my card basket, but the people I know belong to some of the best families in England. December 3rd. Such a tiresome, dreary week. Mrs. Hazelton has dined out 4 evenings out of 6, and now on the 5th she has taken off the children to see the new actor at the Haymarket. I am sorry there won't be room for you in the box, Miss Faunthorpe, she said with her chilly politeness, after I had been toiling for an hour helping moisten the children's maid to tie Lucinda's ribbons and brush Laura's hair, and sew on a tucker for Magdalen. So here I am at 7:30, my hearth swept and my fire made up, as solitary as an old maid with a small annuity. I have been down to the study and chosen a couple of volumes, the best I could find in a dryad's dust collection of antiquities, The Citizen of the World, and a volume of The Spectator, but I don't feel equal to reading either. It suits my present humour better to scribble my complaints against fortune in this ridiculous book of mine. What a lucky woman Mrs. Hazelton is, married to a wealthy Indian judge, and left a widow 6 years ago with an ample fortune, too old to care about marrying again, but not too old to be admired and made much of by her friends. her children young enough to be kept in the schoolroom for the next 4 years. Impossible to imagine a more independent position. What a contrast between her fate and mine. I have never known what it is to have my own way, and yet when I was a child I thought I had only to be grown up in order to taste all the sweets of life. Perhaps that was because of the nonsense people talked about my good looks. I can fancy no greater misfortune for a girl in my position than to be brought up with the idea of being a beauty. When I was a little thing, people were always drawing comparisons between Marion and me, to Marion's disadvantage, and before I was 12 I knew quite well that I was the pretty Miss Faunthorpe. Even old Hester, who never had a civil word for me at the best of times, used to feed my vanity with her taunts about my pretty face and my uselessness. "Handsome is as handsome does," she used to say, by which I knew very well that she thought me handsome. Then came school, and I was set up as a beauty, and courted and petted by one half of the girls, and detested by the other half, and nagged at by Marion, who was set against me by the disagreeable comparisons people were always making between us. What was the consequence of all this? I grew up with the idea that as soon as I left school, some rich young man, handsome and agreeable into the bargain, would fall in love with me at first sight, and that I should be married in grand style at the parish church, 6 bridesmaids and ever so many carriages and pairs, before the admiring eyes of all Redcastle. I came home to Uncle Robert's dull red house prepared for conquest. Life would be like a fairy tale. Some fine summer morning the handsome young prince would appear, and I should be raised at once from Cinderella's obscurity to Cinderella's high fortune. Foolish creature that I was, I used to lay awake at night telling Marion the grand things I would do for her when I was married. "Where is the prince to come from, Sib?" she asked me once, rather maliciously. "You know there are not above 3 such young men in Redcastle. Young Taylor, the lawyer's son, Mr. Lacey, the biscuit manufacturer, and George Pinsford, the coachmaker." "Biscuit manufacturer!" I exclaimed. "Do you suppose I would marry a low tradesman? Aren't they the county families, stupid?" Well, here I am, after 2 weary years' home life with Uncle Robert, who I must say is the dearest old thing in the world. Here I am, nearly 20, and no nearer finding the Prince of Fairy Law than when I left Miss Worry's establishment for young ladies at Kilmorden after 3 years' experience as a pupil teacher. Here I am, a poor drudge of a governess, at just £10 a quarter, thankful for being asked down to the drawing-room, where my beauty goes for very little. All Mrs. Hazelton's friends have found out by this time that I am only the governess, and have left off asking one another who I am, as they used to do at first with some show of interest. I sing or play, and someone who has been chattering the whole time says languidly, "Very nice, really, thank you, Miss Faunthorpe," and I sit in the angle between the back drawing-room fireplace and the window curtain for the rest of the evening, watching and listening, with no more part in what is going on than if I were at the theatre. Let me look in the glass and see what this lauded beauty is, which has brought me so little luck. A small straight nose, very sharply cut, a short upper lip, under lip a thought too full, teeth good, chin round and dimpled, face a perfect oval, eyes darkest brown, the sort of eyes which I believe are usually called black. Hair dark brown with a tinge of gold where it ripples, the colour usually called chestnut. Present expression, discontent, and a tendency to ill temper. I have given up that foolish notion of a rich husband, but I sometimes indulge in another daydream, perhaps just as foolish. What if my rich uncle, Stephen Trenchard, were to come home, take a fancy to me, and leave me a fortune? Such things have happened. I remember how my poor mother used to talk of her brother Stephen, the Indian merchant, and of the ship that was coming home to bring her ease and comfort, and which never came. Will the ship come home for me, I wonder, now that my poor mother has been lying 10 years in her quiet grave? December 13th. The most wonderful thing has happened, the most unlooked for, the most extraordinary. My heart beats so fast at the mere thought of it that I am almost breathless as I write these lines. My hand trembles, and the letters look blurred and dim before my eyes. I have seen the son of Philip Secretan, my Uncle Stephen's deadly enemy, the man whom he supplanted in the affections of a weak old father, for surely any father must be weak who would disinherit his son in favour of a dependent, the man from whom he received the injury that lamed him for life. How often have I heard my mother tell the story, always putting her brother's conduct in the most favourable light.